afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Well, let's try again. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Trying to fix. Here we go. Can you hear me? Yes. Wonderful. I greet you all in the name above all name. I extend peace to you. Welcome to another session of reflection and prayer. We, the community prayer team, are happy that you are here. We also want to say a special thank you and welcome to those that have joined us via Facebook Live. We hope that you will find this time meaningful and that you will encounter God. On the subject of encountering God, that's our topic today. We will be reflecting on various ways and frameworks through which we encounter the divine. We'll be hearing from each member of the community prayer team on how they personally encounter God in their own personal lives. Encountering God is not monolithic, it's varied. And you will see that on display and hear that today. Before we dive in, let us pray. Praying will look a little bit different today. We'll spend most of the time holding what we're praying in our thoughts. First, let us center ourselves. Let's pause and be still. Quiet our hearts. Try your very best to be fully present in this moment. Yes, we have things to attend to, but let's take the next 30 seconds to stop, reflect, and be still. God is here. God is for us. God is with us. And God is in us. Feel your heart beating. It is God who gives life. You are breathing. God gives life. You made it to class or work today. God made a way. You are getting an education or you have a job. God made a way. Let us take the next 30 seconds to acknowledge that there is something beyond us that sustains us. And that thing, some call it God, is active in this world.
We live in community. Think about your family. Think about your loved ones, your cherished relationships. What would you do without them? Think about the joy they bring or the absence. HIU is its own community. Think about our leaders here. Think about the students. Think about the faculty. Think about staff. Think about HIU's vision and its mission. Think about its recent rebranding. Think about your work friends. Think about the recent additions to our beloved community, Khalil, Francis, and Miles. Let's take the next 30 seconds to pray in your own way for HIU. We live in a world made up of many different identities. And sometimes we're at peace, and sometimes we're at war. Think about Ukraine and Russia. The ongoing conflicts and deeply immoral acts from which no one is spared. Let's take the next 30 seconds to pray in your own way for our world. Lastly, think about you. Often we're so busy that we never get the chance to check in with ourselves. How are you doing? What's bringing you joy in this season? What troubles you deeply? What are your goals? How are you taking care of yourself? Are you being kind to yourself? Patient with yourself? Let's take the next 30 seconds to pray for you. Pray that your heart will remain sweet and soft, as my mama used to say. And we all say, Amen.
again. It's so good to see you in person. It's not very personal, or it's not like how I relate to God, like through art, or like it's not how, yeah, so it's just like one of the Islamic form of art, which is like calligraphy, through which a lot of people search for divine. The term Islamic art is not usually, or not used merely to describe religious art or architecture, but it also applies to all forms of art that were produced in different parts of the world. Calligraphy is a very important art form of art in the Islamic world. So in pre-Islamic days, writing was known to the people of Arabian Peninsula, and a rudimentary Arabic script was in use. It was rudimentary because they had little use for it. Being a culture with a strong oral tradition, then after the revelation of the Quran, they felt the need of preserving it. Arabic required a special status, as it was seen as the language of God, chose for revealing his blessed words. The letters of the alphabet were now magical beings, since they were capable of holding and preserving the divine word. So the early scribes gave the script a makeover. Kufic was the first Arabic script to be made consciously beautiful. These were still days when those in charge of reciting the Quran knew it by heart, so the practical aspect of legibility was of secondary concern. Much more important was the sheer beauty of the text, its balance, harmony, and the feeling of wonder it inspired. For 300 years, only Kufic was beautiful and monumental enough to write the Quran, and in Maghreb, which is North Africa and the lands of West Egypt, it never lost its status, but evolved a particular cursive form, equally open to variation. The Maghrebi script, which was used in the Levant and in the Middle East, where the capitals of Muslim world were always situated, vast amounts of administrative work meant a multitude of professional scribes, and that inevitably led to the rise of cursive or round scripts, quicker to write and more adapted to the smaller scale of letters and official documents. Eventually, attempts were made to elevate a round script to the status of Kufic to make it worthy of sacred text. The 6 tiles of the classical tradition of Islamic calligraphy were created and perfected by the Muqla and his successors Ibn al-Bawwab and Yaqut. The six styles of calligraphy are Nasb, Thuluth, Muhaqqaq, Rayani, Riqa, and Tawweed. Well, the traditional instrument of Islamic calligraphy is the qalam, or the pen, normally made of dried reed or bamboo. And Islamic calligraphy can be applied to a wide range of decorative mediums other than paper, such as tiles, vessels, carpets, and stones. Before the advent of paper, papyrus and parchment were used for writing. During the 9th century, an influx of paper from China revolutionized calligraphy. So Baba Shah Isfahani was a famous Iranian calligrapher in the 16th century. Baba Shah Isfahani says that practice of the art of calligraphy requires moderation and balance in the soul, without which the expression of the divine beauty with pen and ink becomes flawed. He also believed that purity is one of the 12 parts of the script, and he says, purity is that condition which makes the temperament happy and refreshed, and makes the eye luminous. One cannot attain it without cleansing the heart. As Sultan Ali said, purity of writing is from purity of heart. Authority, or the word sha'an in Arabic, I'm not sure if it's like a good translation, but shan, or authority, which is the last part of the script in the step, which is the last part of the script, is the step that makes calligraphy into a part of mysticism. The word shan is the Sufi terminology for the specification of divine manifestation into form. When the scribe's pen possesses authority, heedless of the pleasures of the world, he turns his heart towards practice, and luminous sparks of real beloved's beauty appear in his vision, says Baba Shah Isfahani. Well, at this point, the calligrapher goes beyond his art to a perception of invisible inner nature that is only partially revealed in the script. Only those endowed with the eyes to see have the ability to see the inner beauty. So calligraphy is just not the form of art, but for some it is the manifestation of the divine. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm so glad to be here and to see everybody's smiling faces and to see the eyes of those who are wearing masks. It's such a wonderful blessing and a pleasure to be here and to see you. I want to give a shout out to Dr. Bilal Ansari. So, for my form of art that connects me with the divine, I chose to go back to pictures that I incorporated with my grandmother when I graduated with my bachelor's degree from Auburn University. There's two pictures that I would like to incorporate. First is the one that you all see with me sitting on the bench and looking at her, smiling, sitting on the bench. And the second one is this one with me looking up to heaven and her smiling down from heaven and blowing a kiss to her. I'll pass this one around the room for people to get a closer look. They say a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, this one is worth 1,000 feelings. My grandmother passed away from cancer the summer before my senior year. And my grandmother, she had a smile that could brighten anybody's day. She had a laugh that would tickle your soul, and a voice that would calm any anxious heart. She used to always say that she couldn't wait until my graduation day, and that there was nothing that was going to stop her from being there. During my senior year, I thought about her every single step of the way, and I knew that I wanted to honor her in my graduation pictures. So I reached out to one of my friends and asked him, was there a way that he could edit her into the background of those pictures? 4 years later, these pictures mean more to me now than they did back then. When I have bad days, I look at it and I see her smile, and then I smile. I close my eyes and I can picture her saying, "How you doing, Trey Trey?" And when I open my eyes, I can say, "I'm doing just fine." There's a song that says, Everybody's looking for that something. One thing that makes it all complete. You'll find it in the strangest places. Places you never knew that they could be. It's amazing how one look at that photo can change my whole mood. I've come to realize there's God's way of saying not only is she still with me, but he's still with me too. Even though I can't see him, I still feel him. Even though I can't see her, I still feel her. It makes the scriptures in the Bible that talks about how he'll always be with us and he'll never leave us come alive to me. All I have to do is close my eyes and open my heart and believe. Thank you.
For me, I choose another form of art from Christian tradition. So as a Protestant from Indonesia, I grew up in a Christian environment that is different from and perhaps even apologetic and polemical toward Catholicism. One of these contentious points was the theology of saints. Protestants are not supposed to venerate saints. That's what my parents told me, including Mother Mary, like what Catholics do, because such practice would reflect a theology that compromises Jesus Christ's role as the sole or the only mediator. And even though that apologetic tendency decreased after I began my theological training in a seminary in Indonesia and gained more ecumenical vision, the question regarding saints remained a contentious one for myself. Because of that spiritual upbringing, I have a particular interest on the topic of saints. And I do believe right now that the teaching on saints rooted in the belief that human beings can mediate God's grace and become media for other humans to encounter God. Besides stories of the saints' lives and deeds, one way the Christian tradition keeps the memory of them is through icons, as can be seen in stained glass windows in churches. And here I brought one example. In Protestant churches, you might see mostly biblical related figures in the interior art. So if you see on the wall, mostly it's the story of biblical figures. So not saints like in Catholic Church. And the previous one is a beautiful stained glass that depicts the life of Moses. So since I came to the US, I always eager to visit new churches, partially to look at what kind of arts they have inside, especially the stained glass or other picture, because they convey certain theological understanding. And also, it's a good way to keep me busy when the sermon is too long. So when I was a PhD student in Boston, I visited Boston University's Marsh Chapel for Sunday worship several times. One time, I could not get any seat in the lower sanctuary. So I moved upstairs, looking upon some beautiful stained glass windows. I realized that there are some images of holy figures that I could not identify. I recognized John the Baptist, Apostle Paul, and Apostle Peter, but not others, except one, Abraham Lincoln. And then afterward, after digging some material, I found out that those other figures were of Horace Mann, a famous American educator, Booker Washington, a prominent African-American leader and educator, Alexander Graham Bell, the renowned scientist who invented the first phone. And this one next to Lincoln is Francis Willard, a 19th century American educator and political activist. What was the point of including these figures among this church's sacred images together with biblical figures? What is the message that this image conveyed to people? For me, It means that anyone can become saints. And saints are not only figures of past. There are saints who reveal new modes of God's grace through their lives and callings, like Abraham Lincoln, Horace Mann, Francis Willard, Booker Washington, and Alexander Graham Bell. I can understand why a president who abolished slavery, an innovative educator, an African American intellectual leader, influential scientist, and activist for women liberation can stand side by side with John the Baptist, Peter, and Paul. All of them were part of the intercommunicative mediations that reveal different modes of God's grace in history. Those modern figures might not always explicitly confess Jesus Christ, but through embracing their own humanity and their existence, they mediate God's grace to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima, Trevion, and Hans. When I started seminary, my first day was okay. I found out that Moses didn't wrote the Torah. And I found out that Paul didn't, write Hebrews. And I didn't know how to make sense of that. So my faith started to fall apart. Then when I started learning biblical languages and I realized that, these texts are shot with grammatical errors, I realized that God couldn't have written these texts, that they are human creations. I went to my professor's office and I'm like, hey, I am losing my faith and it's the only thing I have that makes sense to me. And he recommended Anam Cara by John O'Donoghue. John was a Catholic priest who moved to Ireland and started reading about Celtic traditions, and from that he wrote this book. And my professor opened the page to 125 and read the blessing of solitude. And it pierced my heart, and I hope it does the same to you. A blessing of solitude. May you recognize in your life the presence, power, and light of your soul. May you realize that you are never alone. That your soul in its brightness and belonging connects you intimately with the rhythm of the universe. May you have respect for your own individuality and difference. May you realize that the shape of your soul is unique, that you have a special destiny here, that behind the facade of your life, there is something beautiful, good, and eternal happening. May you learn to see yourself with the same delight, pride, and expectation with which God sees you in every moment. This is how I encounter God, through poetry. Friends, this brings us to the end of today's session. I do hope that you were blessed by what Fatima, myself, Hans, and Trevion shared today. At the end of this, we're going to eat. So we welcome you all to feast. We have a taco bar. We have rice, we have beans, we have chips, we have salsa, we have chicken, and it's all halal friendly. For those who are vegan, we have lettuce, onions, tomatoes, all those weird things that you can put on your tacos. So help us with setting back the tables up, and then we can all start eating. Thank you all.